On New Year's Day 1910, Mrs. Eddy quickly composed 2 brief stanzas which she read aloud to her household. O blessings infinite, O glad New Year, sweet sign and substance of God's presence here. Give us not only angel songs, but science vast, to which belongs the tongue of angels and the song of songs.
It was an expectant start to a remarkable year of tasks brought to completion. During 1910, Mrs. Eddy was continuing to revisit her published and unpublished writings, sharpened pencils near at hand. This year would bring a small, beautifully designed selection of her poems. She also continued rewording, clarifying, and amplifying passages of the Christian Science textbook.
She would pick up a book from her desk, and if an improvement in a sentence suggested itself to her, she would pencil it in the book, then call Mr. Fry and tell him to send it to the publisher. Adelaide Still.
She wrote, "It was not myself, but the divine power of truth and love infinitely above me, which dictated science and health with key to the Scriptures. I have been learning the higher meaning of this book since writing it."
Another book had been in manuscript form for some time. It was to be a collection of her own writing since 1896 with an account of the dedication of the Mother Church extension. In 1906, Mrs. Eddy had copyrighted the title, The First Church of Christ Scientist and Miscellany.
She told her publisher at the time, "It will contain what will do you more good than perhaps any other book of mine, but Science and Health."
In 1909, Mrs. Eddy had given Miscellany one last review. The compilation was then filed away for safekeeping.
The manuscript was laid aside to be published at some future time. Calvin Fry.
When Miscellany was published in 1913, it would include many of the vigorous letters, pastoral messages, and metaphysical essays she produced throughout her Chestnut Hill years. March brought Count Helmut von Moltke to Boston. A Christian Science practitioner in Berlin, the Count had been urging that Science and Health be translated into German. In Boston, he wrote Mrs. Eddy simply of his deep gratitude for the ways the Publishing Society was supporting the field in Germany.
My English is too bad to write much to you. My thankfulness to you is expressed in my work for the cause of Christian Science. Yours in truth and love, Helmut Graf von Moltke.
Having given the matter years of thought and prayer, and perhaps moved by the Count's sincerity, Mrs. Eddy sees this as the divinely impelled moment to act.
"Please take immediate steps," she instructed her publisher, "to have Science and Health translated into the German language." In the same letter she specified alternate pages of English and German, one side to contain the divinely inspired English version, which shall be the standard.
Mrs. Eddy also enjoyed pleasant moments entertaining friends who sometimes, to her delight, brought their children to meet her. One of these happy moments was a visit by her own grandsons, George and Andrew, who traveled east from the Glovers' home in South Dakota. On her birthday in July, they gave her a pin made of gold from their father's mine. Their grandmother gave each of them what she valued greatly, the Christian Science textbook. Newsmen photographed the boys, still holding their books. She kept the framed photo where she could see it often. Before her visit with her grandsons, she had gone for her daily carriage ride. Perhaps wanting a photo for the press on her birthday, the amateur photographers in the household were asked to take snapshots.
As she was about to step into her carriage, we all snapped our Kodaks. I recall how she posed there, graceful, dignified, and commanding in appearance. John Salkow.
Her daily drive at this time was a metaphysical demonstration in her eyes.
She told one worker, "I do not take this drive for recreation, but because I want to establish my dominion over mortal mind's antagonistic beliefs."
The drive demonstrated to a curious world that she was still the active leader, despite persistent rumors that she was not.
One day, Mrs. Sargent told me that a car with reporters from the Boston Traveller had followed the carriage. Mrs. Eddy asked, "What do they want, Calvin?" He replied, "Your picture, Mother." She said, "Well, let them have it." And Mrs. Eddy leaned forward for them to take the picture. Adelaide still.
The press and their rumors were quieted for a day. The 20-minute drive, usually around nearby Chestnut Hill Reservoir, gave her private time to observe, reflect, and often pray.
"I have uttered some of my best prayers in a carriage," she said. During one drive, she observed, "Every leaf upon every tree declares perpetually that God is love."
Day after day, people standing on tiptoe to gawk into her carriage windows intruded on those private moments. A neighboring child once took up a vantage point at the main gate. One day, the girl's stare was particularly insolent, perhaps influenced by hateful remarks about Mrs. Eddy she had heard.
The man who drove the horses for Mrs. Eddy came in very incensed and wishing to punish that girl. Just at that moment, Mrs. Eddy called for him and sent him with an attractive basket of peaches and her card expressing love to the girl he wanted to punish. The girl never bothered again and was full of apology for her rudeness. Of course, the realization of God's allness and man's unity with him must accompany such a gift to bring out healing, as it did in this case. Minnie Scott.
The mother in Mrs. Eddy had always had a soft spot for children, including youngsters climbing a hillside she saw from her carriage window.
She remarked, "They remind me much of my disposition as a child. No hill was too high. I wanted to reach the top and look over."
She spoke fondly of that childhood to Adam Dickey.
When she was about 8, she recalled, her mother read aloud the story of Daniel praying 3 times a day.
She also decided to pray every day to God, not only 3 times, but 7 times. She would leave the house and retire to the woodshed where she could be alone, and there she knelt and prayed 7 times daily. She kept a small piece of chalk and marked on the side of the shed each time. Adam Dickey.
Mrs. Eddy's face lit up as she told him, "Just think of that little tot, praying 7 times a day and making a record of each prayer so she would not miss one."
That little tot from Bow was now in 1910, in her 90th year.
"Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you."
On New Year's Day, she had begun the year by reading to her household chapter 14 from the Gospel of St. John.
"The Comforter, which is the Holy Ghost, whom the Father will send in my name, he shall teach you all things, and bring all things to your remembrance, whatsoever I have said unto you." This Comforter, she wrote, I understand to be divine science. Of herself, she said, "God has enabled me to discover and to make known on earth the divine science of the divine principle that heals the sick and saves the sinner through Christ, truth, life, and love."
Those words may sum up the life work that had been her mission.